Nutritionist. I am also a food blogger and a recipe developer in the Cleveland area. I live in that area-ish. And I'm also studying integrative and functional nutrition to become an integrative and functional nutrition certified practitioner. My bachelor's is from Kent State and my master's is from the University of Kansas Medical School. I also studied public health on a basketball scholarship for my first 2 years. So I really got into the nutrition side of things through public health, and in 2011 I started studying it. I've been a dietitian for about 5 years now. So today we're going to get to talk about one of my favorite topics, and I'd probably argue that it's the most emerging health topic, not only just nutrition related, but just in our health overall, and that's on gut health. How many people have been seeing this on the news or in research or in conversations? It's really looking at gut health, which is huge, and I'm going to really dive into the nutrition component and how I talk about gut health almost every day in my practice. I'll talk a lot. I'll try to pace myself, but if there's any questions, I really do want this to be interactive. So one, if anything doesn't make sense, you're confused, you have a question, just stop me and I'm happy to answer them as we go along. So this quote was said 2,000 years ago, and he really was onto something because now we're looking at it to be true. All disease begins in the gut. He did not mean that literally, but what he was speaking on is if you look at gut health, how are our diseases associated with our gut health? So I'm going to go into the science. I won't bore you too much, but really when you talk about gut health, you're talking about the gut microbiome. And what that is, it's the human digestive tract's associated microorganisms. Just to give you kind of perspective, our gut microbiome contains tens of trillions of microorganisms, including 1,000 different, to date, known species of bacteria. That's just what we know right now. More than 3 million genes. That's 150 million times more human genes. And it's relatively unique to all of us. So if I were to have my gut microbiome studied, it would be different than yours. It would be different than yours. It's said to be about a third of our gut microbiome is similar across everyone, and then about 2/3 is unique for you. So I kind of say it in this way. Look at it, your gut health, your gut microbiome, look at it as like your identity card or your blueprint. So it's really unique to you. This is probably one of my favorite statistics, is 70 to 80% of our immunity is derived from our gut. 70 to 80% of our immune system is derived from our gut. That is huge. The roles of our gut. And just to give you a relative perspective, which there is a picture on the next slide, but your gut is really your digestive tract. But really when you're talking about your gut microbiome, you're talking about your large intestine or your colon. So that's where really all the magic happens, I like to say. So the role of the gut microbiome, or the role of the gut,
Would you mind repeating that, just what you said?
Yeah, sorry. So when you hear about gut health on wherever on the news or in conversation, really as a whole, you're looking at your whole digestive tract. And I have a good visual on the next page. But really when you're talking about your gut microbiome, when we're talking about these bacteria and the microorganisms that are being studied, it's really looking at your large intestine and your colon. Yep. Just the large. Because your small intestine is where digestion happens, but your small intestine really is where the fermentation happens. And I'll go more into detail about that. But the roles of the gut, it enhances digestion and absorption of foods and nutrients. It aids in producing essential nutrients like some of your B vitamins. It allows for greater nutrient bioavailability, which is your pre-digestion. Influences metabolism, can help decrease inflammation, and it influences our immune system function. So this is what I was talking about. Sorry, I hope that's big enough to see. Your digestive tract is really from the mouth all the way down, but really when we're looking at specific microorganisms and gut microbiome, it is your large intestine. I like pictures. Okay. How many of us have heard of the gut-brain axis, or really the gut-brain connection? This is, you have, yeah. Hi there, you look very familiar.
I'm married.
Yeah!
I actually want to admit that. I don't even want to admit that I work with them.
We'll check after. Okay, so the gut-brain connection is one of the, this is science, but it's really, really cool to understand. Your gut is considered your second brain, and let me explain why. We have a gut-brain axis, or a connection. What it is, it's the direct connection between your gut and your brain. So your gut is what's functioned by the enteric nervous system. Your brain is functioned by the central nervous system. These two communicate directly via the vagus nerve. And I know that this is really science, but it kind of makes sense. Think of this as your brain and your gut interaction. Think of it as its own road, and only them communicate on it. What happens is this direct connection has a link between our cognitive and emotional centers of the brain to our intestinal functions. And then your gut microbiome can influence this interaction. So the best way that I can explain it, I was an athlete, so I'll kind of give a example this way. Before you go play a sport, sometimes you get really anxious and nervous and excited, or before you give a big speech, you can get nervous and excited. How many of us have heard of those who get who get so nervous that they have loose stools, or they actually get sick, or they have, diarrhea, whatever it may be? That's actually your gut and your brain communicating. Your cognitive and your brain systems are communicating with your intestinal functions. So the whole butterflies, if you get butterflies, that's actually true. It's science. So it's pretty cool. So really when you're talking about gut health and what's being researched right now, they're really diving deep into this area. And I probably should have said this first. This is so new and emerging that a lot of this research is ongoing, and there's no concrete evidence to date. So it's really emerging science, and we're going to find more and more 5 to 10 years from now. So the development of our gut health. So people often ask me, okay, so how do I have good health, or good gut health? I know this is a lot in this slide, but I really do want to kind of emphasize that it actually starts in the mother's womb. Your microorganisms are colonized by your mother, and then at birth. So this is funny, but in my talks, when I see someone one-on-one, I really do, especially if I think some gut health is going on, I'll say, okay, if you don't mind, I'm going to go way, way back. And I'm like, so were you delivered C-section, or were you delivered vaginally? And the looks that I get, it's like, why is the dietitian asking me this? But it actually is true. It does give a really good picture as to our gut health, because it starts as early as birth. So C-section versus vaginal birth, bottle-fed versus breastfed. Breast milk has something called bifidobacterium, which is one of the most researched, have you guys heard of that before? It's one of the most researched probiotics out there. It is like gold. It's phenomenal. That if you now go into the infant formula section of a grocery store, how many, which I don't know if anyone is, but if you go, you'll see on a lot of infant formulas now with probiotics, now with bifidobacterium, because they're really trying to match what's in breast milk. And I completely understand reasons for formula feeding. I'm not here to dispute that by any means, but know that infant formula will never equate to breast milk. They're trying really, really hard to make it as similar as possible, which I definitely respect, but there really isn't a comparison right now. Technology is incredible, so we'll see where that goes. Another thing is modern medicine, the recurrent use of antibiotics. And we'll kind of dive into antibiotics, but if you guys, obviously, I've been on an antibiotic before, I'm sure maybe some of you have, but what antibiotics do is they wipe the bad bacteria. Unfortunately, they are so powerful that they take the good with it. And it's really hard to restore some of that good bacteria. So that's always something that I ask is medication use and antibiotic use. And then in children, same thing, modern medicine, and then our eating habits begin to change. Another thing is now more than ever, our exercise as a whole, as a society, has gone down because of technology and phones and computers and all of that. So exercise really can alter our gut microbiome. You know, how much are children in front of a screen versus outside playing with that fresh air and all of that. Same thing with adolescents, but I would also argue the use of, or stress, you know, you guys are in the school system, teenagers experience that. Sleep is a huge one. Sleep is changing during the teenage and adolescent years, especially, you know, as we get into adulthood. Something else is birth control for women who, get on birth control. That's something that can alter our gut microbiome. Really, the same thing applies to adults. It's modern medicine. Our diet is huge. Sleep, exercise, and I would say stress is a huge one that I often have conversations about. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question, because under each one of those it talked about modern medicine.
Yeah.
You were saying it also wipes out the good. How long does it take it to recover them?
So that's what research is looking at now. But to give you a comparison, it's like when you take an antibiotic, it's relative. What I can kind of compare, it's like taking 10 steps back. And I'm not here, because antibiotic use is absolutely necessary when it is. So I'm not here to say anti-antibiotics by any means, but do know that there are some things that we can do when you are taking antibiotics. So if you do get on an antibiotic, first and foremost, make sure that that's the absolute necessary thing to take. If it is, I would strongly encourage getting on a probiotic right then and there if you're not already on one.
So if you are a child,
Yes.
and take my son for instance, the first 7 years, he was pretty much solid antibiotics. Does that affect them as an adult then?
Depending on other factors, you know, does your son, you said, ear infections? Yeah, so that's a big one. Allergies, are there allergies coming? So I can kind of do some predictions based on that. It doesn't, I always say this, because, right, we're all no longer infants or newborns. We can't control that at this point in our lives, but what we can control is what we have, you know, within our ability. So what I say by that is diet, exercise, getting on a good probiotic, because yes, it does take time to restore that good bacteria, but it's not a lost cause by any means. Stress management, looking at if there's food intolerances that might be causing gut health. I'll dive some more into that. Allergies, is there food intolerances that might be influencing allergies? That's a huge one. Asthma, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the dairy.
Diagnosis of IBS as well, so that
Yeah.
feeds into that as well.
Yep.
So changing gut health, would that also then change some of those diagnoses?
It can give like 100%, 150%. But do you see, like, now that we're talking about it out loud, how it has these, looking back, hindsight, and how you can see how it's kind of added up? It doesn't mean that that's the end destination. I was having this conversation before. How many of us have heard of, maybe not, but nutrigenomics is right alongside of gut health. That's probably the top nutrition research to date. It's looking at our genes and how it influences our eating habits. Your genes are your genes, right? There's nothing we can do about that. It doesn't give you your end destination, but it does give you a good pathway to go on. So same with like your gut health. Knowing this history from C-section versus vaginal birth, from bottle fed versus breastfed, knowing all of these, it gives us a good indicator moving forward. Okay, good question. Yeah,
Do you
please.
ever eat enough yogurt
Can you ever eat enough?
to get rid of that? You said probiotic and everything.
Yeah, I'll talk about yogurt down. Yes, there is such thing as too much yogurt because it is dairy, so it's a give and take, and I'll kind of dive into that. Just so you know, to go back, I don't have my phone, I would make sure I'm on that. To go back, I think something that most people don't realize is stress. You guys are I'm assuming all of us are in a school system, so I know stress is something that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. I will tell you this, 70 to 80% of doctors' visits are stress-related. About 95% of illnesses or conditions, health conditions, are either caused by or worsened by stress. And if you think about what you go to your doctor for, I would argue diet, stress, and sleep are the top 3 most under talked about topics at your doctor's office, when they really should be some of the most important topics that we're discussing. I could have an entire conversation and PowerPoint on stress and how it relates to our eating habits, but I will say stress alone alters your gut microbiome. I'm not a therapist by any means. I don't know the solutions to stress. I'm always open to hear things, but do know that it does have an effect on our health in all aspects. How many of us have heard of dysbiosis? So this is a fancy word of saying that it's what happens when you have an imbalanced or disrupted gut. The definition is an imbalance in your bacterial composition. So we have good bacteria and we have bad bacteria. Excuse me. Dysbiosis is when we have an imbalance in that well-balanced good versus bad. In healthy individuals, basically what we're seeing is a really good even of good and bad. More good, if anything, but not more bad than good bacteria. So when we have dysbiosis, we have an imbalance going on. There's 3 types of dysbiosis. What happens is, one is when you have a loss of the good bacteria or your beneficial bacteria. The second is overgrowth of potentially bad bacteria. And then the third is loss of overall bacterial diversity. That right there is probably one of the most common when you take an antibiotic because it wipes you clean of both good and bad. So that's a common one with antibiotics. I don't know if you can see this, but this is really what a healthy intestine looks like. And then this is intestinal dysbiosis. You can just see how there's less bacterial composition in there. What happens is it triggers inflammation, which alters your microbiota and barrier function. And it is associated with intestinal and extra-intestinal disorders. So, what are those disorders? I will say this first and foremost, small font, because it's a lot, but this is all emerging science. I always want to make that known. But here's currently what's being studied. Irritable bowel disease and irritable bowel syndrome is probably one of the most studied when it comes to gut health. Autoimmune diseases, arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia. I see that often. They have one common denominator, and that's inflammation. If we know that if we have an imbalance in our gut that causes inflammation, well, is that triggering some autoimmune disorders? C. diff infection. That's a big one that's being studied. How many of us have heard of this leaky gut? Have you ever heard of that term? That's a very controversial term. If you talk to some physicians, they may not agree with that. But what this is a breakdown in your intestinal barrier that allows foreign substances to get into your intestines, which causes flare-ups and inflammation. That's a big one. SIBO and Candida. SIBO is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, and Candida is yeast overgrowth. Food intolerances. I see that very, very often. Allergies. Weight status, mental health, so depressive disorders, anxiety, bipolar, currently being studied for Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, brain fog, poor concentration and memory, skin and immune system, eczema is a huge one when it comes to gut health. Big red flag. And then blood sugar management, so diabetes. So those are just, not just some, but those are some intestinal and extra-intestinal disorders that are being studied in association with gut health. Now, I'm kind of going to shift it more towards nutrition because this is my area. What are some signs of poor gut health? Been doing this for 5 years now. This past year, I've been really diving deep into gut health. And so when I get questions, when I talk to clients, I can have based on what they're telling me, it's red flags of poor gut health or something might be going on. What that is here's some signs specific to food and nutrition. This one is a funny one. A sign of gut health, feeling uncomfortable after eating a meal. I'm not talking about overeating and feeling, overly full. But when you're eating and you're getting uncomfortable as if maybe pain is happening, that's not normal. Bloating and excessive gas after meals, also not normal. Irregular bowel movements, that's probably the most common that I see. I just want to kind of make this clear. Not going to the bathroom every day, that is not normal. So oftentimes I get people coming in to see me, and yes, I talk about poop every day. I used to work at a children's hospital, and I had a poop diagram that I would take around. I know it's really weird. I worked with malabsorption children, and so stool tells you a lot about that. But anyways, I will talk to someone and I say, how often do you go to the bathroom? And I really commonly hear, well, I go every 4 days, but that's my normal. That's not normal. So really, ideally, we should be going once to twice a day. Now, granted, we have some instances where things can cause loose stools or things can cause constipation, but overall, we should be going regularly. Foul-smelling stools are another one. Joint pain, fatigue, and brain fog. Not being able to concentrate, those are all signs of gut, let's do some more investigating. Food sensitivities and intolerances, I deal a lot with that every day. And then abdominal pain, which can kind of go into feeling uncomfortable after a meal. These are all signs to me, as a dietitian, that we need to do some investigating with our gut health. So risk factors and associated gut health. So poor diet, which is obviously what I'm going to talk about. What does that really mean? What does a poor diet really mean? That's a big one. We already talked about recurrent antibiotic use. High unmanaged stress. I can't say it enough. Poor sleeping patterns. Illness. Being sick does impair your immune system. And we know 70 to 80% of our immune system function is derived from our gut. Modern medicine, so taking medications that may have alterations to your gut. Environmental imbalances, so chronic exposure to pesticides and herbicides. I know that there's a big push for organic and all that, that's for another time, but do know that these can add up and have an effect on our barrier wall of our intestine. Toxic metal exposure, so mold, lead, and mercury, and then some hidden infections. That's something that would be an underlying cause. Am I going too fast? No? Okay. So let's talk about diet and gut health and our gut microbiome. Your diet directly impacts your gut microbiome. So what has a negative effect on our guts? So when I talk about poor eating habits, what are those? Eating a lot of added sugar. Sugar feeds on cells in your intestines. So SIBO is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Candida is yeast overgrowth. Yeast feeds on sugar. So that's added sugar intake, excessive added sugar intake. I mean, we're all humans, so it's not like we can never have sugar, but excessive added intake. All of those food additives that are creeping into our foods that we probably don't even know about, but our food industry sure does. Factory farm meats because of the antibiotic usage and what's being put into those foods. Know that most factory farm meats are raised on food crops such as corn and soy, which are also the most genetically modified food crops, which can also have an impact. Having excessive intake of unhealthy fats. Well, what are unhealthy fats? This is a really easier, hi there, this is a really quite easier switch that I could tell people. So your pro-inflammatory oils, which what I mean by pro-inflammatory, they do cause inflammation in your body. What are those? Soybean, safflower, sunflower, and canola, and no Crisco. But what are healthy, and I talk about this at the next one. If you're using vegetable oils in your home, easier just transition is go to olive oil. And we could talk about butter versus margarine or even ghee, but I do think that there are some healthier alternatives out there other than these vegetable oils. Fried foods and fast foods, which really mean a high intake of saturated fats compared to your unsaturated fats. Artificial sweeteners. You don't have to raise your hand or anything, but oftentimes people transition from regular pop or soda or juice and they go to diet, which is artificially sweetened. I really strongly don't encourage that. I kind of compare regular soda to diet soda as like eating a red apple to a green apple. There are some really good alternatives out there. I'm a big fan of Spindrift, which is a carbonated water that's naturally flavored. There's so many equivalents out there. LaCroix is one. I'm just not really a big fan of that one. If you're using artificial sweeteners in your coffee or in, anything like that, stevia is not artificially sweetened. Stevia is a plant derivative. So I actually have a client that grows her own stevia. It's from a plant and it's still calorie and sugar free, but it is not fake. So do we know what artificial sweeteners are? The actual words? It's aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin are the top 3 artificial sweeteners out there. So you can easily tell if those are in there by reading the ingredient list, because by FDA regulations, they have to be listed on the ingredient list. Anything that is termed sugar-free, I hope I'm saying this not in English. Anything that is sugar-free and still tastes sweet is a red flag. I'm not saying that it's bad, but there's got to be a reason why it's sweet that is still deemed sugar-free. Does that make sense? If it's sweetened with stevia or natural flavors, like orange puree or anything like that, I'm all for. But just try to transition away from artificial sweeteners if you can. I'm also not black, it's not 0 to 100 spectrum, black or white. If you're doing, let's say hypothetical, 5 cans of diet soda and you go down to 3, obviously that's heading in the right direction and that's a benefit. So it's always a give and take. I did my thesis and grad research on artificial sweeteners, so I'm very passionate about that. Another one are processed starches. What are processed starches? They're really those whites, like bread that doesn't really have anything to it, like pasta, that same thing. Those are those processed starches that have an immediate effect on your blood sugar, which spikes it and then drops it, and have sugars to it. So to give you an idea, eating 1 piece of processed white bread is the same as eating 2 spoonfuls of sugar. So there's not much to it other than carbs. Now, I'll talk about the positives. So these are all like the negative things, but I swear there's good things. And then another one, really, as I would describe all of these from here on as inflammatory foods. But something else that I see is more emerging than ever is the conversation around gluten and dairy. I do think, I won't go into detail about that, but I have had patients that I have recommended to trial eliminating that, and it's been significant, the results that they've seen. It really does make a difference if I feel like that's necessary. But gluten and dairy are pro-inflammatory food markers in our diet. So that's for another day, but I would say that is definitely something that I would address and see if that's worth. But I think that before that, we would assess the other ones first.
Inflammation and weight gain. I mean, is there a correlation between the two?
Yes, so if you look at excess body weight, I kind of explain it in a state of excess inflammation, right? So if we're gaining weight that our body does not want to gain, is it probably for a variety of reasons. It's not just diet related, but are we likely eating foods that are causing us to gain weight? Maybe, and what are those foods? Well, a lot of them are pro-inflammatory foods that cause weight gain. But also know stress causes inflammation, stress inhibits weight loss, stress can cause weight gain. Living a more sedentary lifestyle can also play a role. I mean, there's a lot of different things. Poor sleeping patterns, there's good research behind that. But yes, there is a direct correlation between inflammation and your body weight. And I guess I want to point this out too. When I talk about inflammation, I'm not talking about like when your ankles swell up because you had too much salt or you're holding on to water. That's acute inflammation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about chronic inflammation that we actually can't really physically see, but if we had a scope into our body, there would be a lot going on. That's the inflammation I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
Is it
Kind of.
and this is gonna sound kind of graphic, but you know how you have a bump and pus comes out of it. Is that the same idea in your body? It's like full of all this.
No, not
No?
necessarily,
What?
because when I talk about inflammation, it can come in a form of excess body weight. It's really an idea of looking at it as a state of your body's organs having to work in overdrive. So I even look at inflammation. I see a lot of times people come to see me for blood sugar management or diabetes, and I actually talk about inflammation a lot because your body's having to work in overdrive or, over time, and that can cause inflammation in itself. So, okay, so on the bright side, what are some dietary habits that can improve optimal gut health? Fiber, how many of us have heard of that? Oftentimes when you go to the doctor, maybe you don't have to raise your hand or anything, but if you go to the doctor and you're having problems with going to the bathroom, they might give you a stool softener, but I really hope that they're telling you to eat more fiber, because it is true. We'll dive into that. But fiber, so having a good, well-balanced, fiber-rich diet in a sense, and remember, fiber is only found in plant-based foods. Animal products have 0 fiber. Always remember that. There is no fiber in animal products. How many of us, and I talked about it the last presentation, how many of us have heard of the ketogenic? So what happens with the ketogenic, most people wipe out all fruits and really wipe out the nuts and the seeds and the beans and the whole grains. You're really significantly cutting out fiber. One of the most common side effects I see to following a ketogenic lifestyle is constipation, because you're not getting enough fiber. And it does alter, I'm not saying for worse, but it can alter your gut microbiome. So making sure we're eating a lot of fiber-rich foods. Instead of eating those unhealthy fats, we're eating a lot of those healthy fats. My favorite food is probably avocados. And you don't have to just eat an avocado out of the spoon. I mean, you can incorporate that in anything. On tacos, in salads, on a burger, in chili and soups as a topping, anything like that. Fatty fish. Salmon is excellent, wild-caught salmon. I don't know how many people are really eating sardines and anchovies, but those are incredible for you. If you do, that's great. Olives are another one. Nuts and seeds like almonds and cashews and pecans and walnuts. Seeds like sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. Just a little tip that I give to almost all of my patients. How many of us have heard of how many of us have heard of flaxseed? It is, and if you've never tried it, hopefully trust me when I say this, it is tasteless. It does not have a flavor to it. You can buy it in its actual seed form, or you can buy it grounded. So basically it's called flaxseed meal. Go ahead.
The whole flaxseed, they said it's not really, you're not really anything from it if you digest it.
Well, because, so most people, yeah, I'll explain that. So you have the actual seed, or you can buy it grounded. So almost like a powdered substance. You may see it labeled flaxseed meal. So it's a powdered substance. Some people have an intolerance to seeds because of gut health, so they're not really digesting it as well. So most people actually perceive the ground flaxseed better. And it does, I would say that there's an argument as to which one's better absorbed. I think per preference and how people tolerate it, ground flaxseed's better. But it's, oh, go ahead.
No, it's just that just means it's been milled, right? So if you find on the bag it says flax seeds milled.
Yep, it's basically been broken down. But ground flaxseed, I don't want to talk too much about it because I want to get through this, but truthfully, ground flaxseed is flavorless. But it is an amazing omega-3 fatty acid, which is, if you know anything about omega-3 fatty acids, the primary source of omega-3 fatty acids is fatty fish. And let's be real, how many of us are eating 3 servings of sardines a week? It's just not, it's not happening. So I would say overall, we're really cutting short on our fish intake, myself included, but I do incorporate ground flaxseed almost daily. Especially if you're buying it in a powdered form, where can you put it on? Well, so many different places. If you're doing oatmeal, put it in your oatmeal. If you're doing peanut butter toast, put it in your peanut butter toast. If you're doing yogurt, put it in your yogurt. I do smoothies often. I put it in my smoothies and I don't even know it's in there. Those are different ways. But they're an omega-3 fatty acid and they're amazing anti-inflammatory food. So 1, it's hard to get omega-3 fatty acids. 2, it's an excellent source of anti-inflammation. And it is a really good source of protein. So it's like, to me, I would term it as like a superfood if you really want to have it that way. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Before you move on to the next.
Yeah.
Can you ever get too much of avocado? So my daughter's like, I can't have that because that's just too much fat.
Yeah.
So.
One that breaks it. So tell your daughter, eat those fats, love on them. Yes, I would say this. there's only one food group when I would say you can eat seriously as much as you want, and it's vegetables. And unfortunately, it's the least consumed food group out of them all. Aside from that, I would say all of the rest, yes, there is such a thing as too much of one thing, even if it's good for you, can be of concern. So I would say avocados, yes, technically, because they are an amazing sole fat source. But what would I classify as too much avocado? I mean, that would be as like 2 avocados a day. That's a lot. I eat about half of an avocado a day. I would eat more. It's just one, they get a little pricey at times. But I would say, you know, most times people fear avocados because they see the calories and they see the fats. And remember, I'm not really too concerned about calories. I want to know the quality of that food. And if you really dive deep into avocado fat sources, they're amazing fats for us. Avocados are technically considered a fruit. It is the lowest sugar containing fruit out there. So yes, I like avocados, but that's my end spiel on those. Other ones are your healthy cooking oils. So we talked about the unhealthy cooking oils. Some of my favorite healthy cooking oils are extra virgin olive oil or just olive oil, avocado oil, unrefined coconut oil, and then you have those natural nut butters like peanut butter and cashew butter and almond butter, whichever one you like, I'm all for. Other ones are your complex slow carbohydrates, and what are those? Those are your whole grains, those are those beans, fruits, and then like the sweet potatoes or the purple potatoes. Gotta love them because they're full of color. And remember, anything that comes with color means nutrients. So don't fear. A lot of people think potatoes are bad. That's not really true. It's not. Potatoes are not bad, right? I can't argue something that's grown in nature. But we primarily do eat potatoes day in and day out, and we don't just eat like a sweet potato with real butter on it. We either eat sweet potatoes with brown sugar and marshmallow, or we eat French fries, or we eat cheesy potatoes. Those are why potatoes get a bad rep. But potatoes can be part of a healthy lifestyle. Another one is decreased added sugar intake. Second is, we talked about those factory farm raised meats. I like meat. I'm not against meat. But make sure it is of good quality and look at it as a side to your plant-based foods. Dr. Mark Hyman coined this. Meat should be viewed as a condiment, or meat should be viewed as a side to your plant-based foods. If you always keep that in mind, it is a really good reminder to have when you're planning meals. And then those anti-inflammatory foods, which truthfully, all of the above are your anti-inflammatory foods. Fiber-rich foods, which are your fruits and your vegetables. And then hydration. Water, water, water. Love on that water. It is very good for you. Try to think of anything else as kind of extra, like coffee. I love, there's nothing wrong with coffee by any means. Unsweetened tea, great. But really try to stay away from that sugar-sweetened beverages. And then the next 3 slides I'm going to dive into. Your prebiotics, your probiotics, and then those fermented foods. How many of us have heard of the probiotics? That's probably like the number one thing most consumers have read into is probiotics because they've done a phenomenal marketing job. But fiber, as I talked about, is a type of carbohydrate or a plant that cannot be digested. Remember, animal products do not contain fiber. It's coming from a carbohydrate or a plant. So it's indigestible, so your body doesn't break it down. It resides in that large intestine. Some benefits of fiber is blood sugar management, feeling full, so it helps with our appetite, weight management, cardiovascular benefits, regularity, so we talked about bowel movements, that's a big one. And just so you know, the recommended intake is about 25 to 35 grams a day. The most recent research showed that we were eating less than 10 as a whole. And just so you know, a little tip 101 when you're looking at foods and food products when you're going grocery shopping. If you ever see a food product that on the front of that product it says excellent source of fiber, by FDA regulations, no one can just put that claim on there. For it to say that, it has to have greater than 5 grams of fiber per serving to be deemed excellent. If you ever see it being labeled as on the front of a food product, good source of fiber, exclamation point, it has to by FDA regulations be greater than 2.5 grams per serving. So if you ever see that, there's reasons why they're allowed to do that. Not just Twinkies can put that on there. There's absolutely no way that Twinkies would be able to do that unless they add the fiber to it. But just so you know, if it ever says excellent source of fiber, there's a reason why. Prebiotics. I'm going to go over this definition and I'm going to kind of make it a little bit easier because it's kind of too sciencey. It's a selective fermented ingredient that allows specific changes both in the composition and or activity in GI microflora that confers benefits upon host well-being and health. A prebiotic is a type of fiber. It's really what it comes down to. It's a non-living, indigestible carbohydrate, because we know fiber is a carb. It resists digestion in the small intestine, and it reaches your large intestine where it's fermented by the gut. Basically, look at it as food for your probiotics. So I talk about prebiotics being your fuel for your car. So prebiotics are the foods that your probiotics are going to take in to optimally work. So it's like gas for a car. Some natural sources of prebiotics are leeks, asparagus, chicory root fiber. You may see that sometimes in ingredient lists. Jerusalem artichokes, garlics, onions, wheats, oats, soybeans, and bananas, but more the green. So just so you know, the greener the banana, the more resistant the starch. And what that means from a blood sugar perspective, the greener the banana, the less likely your blood sugar is going to spike. There's a reason why most of us like those really yellow bananas, because they actually taste sweeter, and that's because it is sweeter, contains more sugar. Some specific types of prebiotics are inulin, fructooligosaccharides, and then those other oligosaccharides. If you look at an ingredient list and it says it's a source of prebiotics, it will probably contain one of those three, either chicory root fiber, inulin, or fructooligosaccharides. How many of us have heard of Benefiber? If ever your physician told you to take that, look at the ingredient list. It's inulin. So it's a fiber. It's a prebiotic. So now probiotics, which is probably the most recognized topic in gut health from a consumer standpoint. Probiotics are living microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confer health benefits on the host. Remember, prebiotics is the fuel for the probiotics. Prebiotics are non-living. Probiotics are living. Okay, so it's really your bacteria and yeast. The role of probiotics is numerous and it's currently being studied. It decreases the number of bad bacteria. It stabilizes the digestive tract's barriers against those bad bacteria. So it basically makes your gut lining or your barrier stronger. So think of it as like a wall. It helps to stabilize and strengthen it. Replaces the good bacteria that have been lost, maybe through antibiotics or whatever it may be. And it restores the good versus the bad bacterial balance. Benefits of probiotics currently being studied. I would say diarrhea and constipation are the top two right now. There is specific, I won't go into much detail, but there's specific strains of bacteria or probiotics that have been shown to help with diarrhea. There are specific strains of bacteria that have been shown to help with constipation. Now that's always a conversation I have if someone comes in for a specific reason. I'll actually recommend a very specific probiotic that they should be taking.
How do you know which we should be taking? Like, will it just say so, or if you buy them in the store?
Well, yes, it should. So I'll say Phillips is a really Culturelle. Phillips and Culturelle are two common probiotics that come to my mind. I know Culturelle has one for gut health. It's for digestive health. And if you look at the back of it, it's Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus. Those are your probiotics, so those are those bacteria that have been studied for those actual reasons. But if you want to see, like, let's say you're coming to see me for actual hypothetical constipation, I will actually recommend a specific bacteria probiotic that you look for in the store, and all that requires, and I could probably give examples, I know brands specifically, but if you were at the grocery store, you would turn that probiotic around and it will list the bacteria. Does that make sense? So if you're coming for diarrhea and I say, okay, let's focus on the Bifidobacterium strain, whatever probiotic you're buying in the store, you're going to turn it around and make sure that it's bifidobacterium.
Tell me the other.
The other one, that one I don't know off the top of my head for the constipation you're talking about. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but I can find that out for you. I have a huge diagram that basically breaks down all of those with associated brands that I've done my research on. It might come to me, so bear with me. Other ones are irritable bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. The next one are vaginal infections or urinary tract infections. Infection of the digestive tract caused by C. diff. Skin conditions, eczema in children. A little fun fact, you know how remarkable Cleveland Clinic is and how up to date they are. I used to work for Cleveland Clinic Children's. They were actually, this might be too much information, but they were actually looking at fecal transplant into children to help with their gut because they found actual bacterium in stool for C. diff. That's crazy, right? But it did work, and it does have research behind it. Fecal transplant, yeah, it's remarkable. You guys probably didn't need to know that, but that's cool. The next one is prevention of gut inflammation, as I was talking about, inflammation. It supports your immune system and obviously aids in digestion and absorption of foods and nutrients. Sources of probiotics. You can take supplements. Obviously, there's really good supplements out there, but some sources. Yogurt with live cultures. I'll be wrapping up. I want to make this very well known. Not all yogurt contains probiotics. That's like a big myth. Your probiotic, your yogurt will say with live cultures or with probiotics. You will turn that around and it will lay out the specific probiotics in there. And I will guess, based on all that I've researched, it probably has bifidobacterium and lactobacillus because those are the most common bacteria that's being researched right now. How many of us have heard of Activia? That's basically that, right? It talks about regularity and things like that because it has your probiotics. Fermented foods. This is just some of the most common, but I want to make it known. Anything that is fermented will have live microorganisms. So you can ferment anything. But some common ones, if you've ever heard of kefir, that is fermented yogurt. So that's one step further than just regular yogurt with live cultures. Kefir is fermented yogurt. How many of us have ever had kefir or heard of it? It kind of tastes like a thick, Go-Gurt? I grew up on Go-Gurts. You know those string Go-Gurts? That's not very good for you, but I used to eat them all the time. It kind of reminds me of that, or like a thicker smoothie. Would you say? It's not something that you would spoon, but you drink it. Another one, or you can put it in cereal, you can put it in cereal and your oatmeal, anything like that. The next one is kombucha. Kombucha is just fermented tea. I have patients that grow it or that produce it. It's quite easy. I have the bacteria to do so. But kombucha is just fermented tea. Kimchi is a spicy fermented cabbage. And then sauerkraut is another fermented cabbage. Those are really amazing fermented foods, but the options are really endless. It's anything that's fermented. There's also supplements, and this is kind of what I was talking to you about. On supplements, there's going to be something called CFUs. So whatever supplement you see, it may say 10 million CFUs. It may say 10 billion CFUs. It could say 5 million, 50 million. CFUs are your colonizing factor units. That is your bacteria. Okay? If you want my opinion, because I don't know, like if anyone's ever wanting a specific reason to take a probiotic, that's something different. But if you're looking at just more broad spectrum and just general healthy, I would say the more bacteria in that probiotic, the better, because you're kind of wanting to go broad spectrum. Does that make sense? And remember, it will be listed, unless you're addressing specific reasons. Two of the most powerful probiotics out there that have had amazing results. VSL number 3 and Visbiome. Visbione. The scientists behind VSL number 3 left and created Visbiome, so they're relatively the exact same. There's some patent complications with it, but they are truly some of the most powerful, well-researched, effective probiotics. They are very powerful. So it's not just I would never take a VSL number 3 because I don't have specific reasons. I have a patient that has severe IBS and Crohn's, and VSL number 3 has made a significant difference. So it's not just for an everyday thing. It's also prescription ordered. So it's not, you can't go to the store and buy VSL number 3 or Visbiome. So those are some of those. And the last one I want to talk about too, which really isn't my area, but I think it's so important to remember. Diet is just one component to your gut health, and I'd also, sorry, did you have your hand up?
Oh,
Let
I
me
was
back.
the
I
one with the
apologize.
strain of the kombucha, but it's fine. I'm figuring it's probably just the same ones that you talked
Yes,
about.
yep. Yes, I can, yeah, yes. Okay, so lifestyle habits and gut health. I was actually gonna go into the cool, how kombucha's grown, but that'll be like 10 minutes, I'll save you all that. But lifestyle habits and gut health, what I was saying was, you know, diet is really one component of your gut health, and I'd also argue diet is just one component to your health. You can't forget about everything else. So oftentimes I have patients come in to see me, obviously for specific diet reasons, and we really focus on stress. Because as we know, stress influences our eating habits, stress influences our sleeping patterns, stress influences our exercise, stress influences our gut microbiome. So know that I kind of look at your health as an umbrella, and I'll kind of say that the same for your gut health. It's an umbrella. There's multiple factors that play a role. Diet is one, but remember, being able to manage your stress really is very important. Getting in adequate sleep, because we know poor sleeping habits, how that affects our next day, our concentration, our performance, our functioning, our food choices, our desire to cook, our exercise, all of that. Looking at your medication management, figuring out if am I taking something that I can actually control through diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management, or is this obviously necessary? And that's always a conversation to have with your doctor, but really looking into that. And then the last one is support system and being part of a community, which I really do think plays a role in your health and happiness, is making sure you have good support and a part of a community, whether that's with church or exercise or family, whatever it may be. But I do think that those are 4 really important topics to talk about in terms of health and gut health, and then obviously your nutrition component. So, any questions? Does that kind of make sense? I would try not to go too sciencey on you, so I apologize if I did, but if there's any confusion, please let me know. Yeah, go ahead.
We have 3 children.
Okay.
2 of them are pretty, I would say, typical as far as gut health.
Yeah.
One is atypical, and we've done tons of stuff through the Cleveland Clinic, which has been phenomenal. So that's awesome.
For GI or the Functional Medicine Center? Mind if I ask?
Through the GI.
Yeah, awesome.
Through the neurology.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Awesome. So he's now very well regulated, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
So, but is there like a probiotic or a probiotic and a prebiotic that you would suggest that we could give all 3 of our kids? Or would you suggest one would be better for our son who has, deals with the gastromotility versus the other 2 who are just.
Yeah. To stay consistent and for sanity reasons, it would be completely fine to have 3 general like the same, but I would probably recommend ideally to have your one son that has been seen by Cleveland Clinic be on a more specific probiotic, and then your other 2 just like a broad spectrum.
Like a broad spectrum, like Culturelle for
Yeah, I
kids
think
or something like
Culturelle
that.
is a really easily studied and physician supported probiotic. Align is another one. Phillips is another one. Those are kind of the top 3 that I would recommend that you can get over the counter. And then as you go, when you look at probiotics at the store or whatever, you will notice that Culturelle has probably 7 different types. Phillips probably has 5 different types.
Right.
There's one for women's health, for children, for digestion, all of that. There's probably also one for diarrhea and constipation. So I would say more broad spectrum for your 2, and then maybe something a bit more specific for for your other child. One thing I don't want to forget too, if you do ever start a probiotic, depending on how many CFUs, I always say this little term: start low, go slow. Okay, so I have a patient that was started on VSL number 3. That's very powerful, very potent. I wouldn't recommend that for just an everyday usage, anything like that. You can't start taking the optimal recommendation dosage. You really have to start low and go slow, because some of the side effects of probiotics are bloating, excessive gas, maybe some opposite effects of diarrhea and constipation. So it is something that you have to monitor how your body responds.
And for kids, a prebiotic, would you recommend that too, or not necessarily more adult?
So now more than ever, I didn't put this on our PowerPoint, or on my PowerPoint, but now more than ever, there's something called a synbiotic. Not to confuse you, but you have prebiotics, you have probiotics, and now there's a term called synbiotics, SYNBIOTICS. It's basically combining prebiotics and probiotics. So truthfully, most probiotics now probably have a source of prebiotics to it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And all you have to do is check the back and look at some of those common. Inulin is very, very common. Oligosaccharide, fructooligosaccharide, or chicory root fiber. Those are really common ones. Good question. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Is there any probiotic that you, like, not specific, but that you wouldn't recommend, like over-the-counter ones or something like that? Like, if you go to the store, can you pick
so
anything
that's
out?
actually, that's true. Yes, that's a very good question. And this actually applies to all supplements, to be very honest. I would love to give a presentation on supplement usage. It is the one area where I don't recommend buying generic supplements and probiotics. I will not speak on medications because that's not my area. I don't recommend buying any generic supplement or any generic probiotic. They are not regulated, and I just really question what's actually in them. So that does apply. If that answers your question, I wouldn't recommend like a generic Target Up and Up, or I think that's Target, or whatever Target or Walmart's brand is. I would probably stay away from those. Unfortunately, to be very, very honest, you pay for what you get. And I hate to say that because I'm also understanding when it comes to budget and all of that. But that's also why I don't recommend every single person on here being on B12 and B6 and niacin and riboflavin and biotin, because those are all can really add up in terms of supplements or probiotics. It can get really expensive. So really dive deep into a supplement that you actually need and probiotics, and you do pay for what you get.
What about like probiotics, like at the health store? You go in and they're refrigerated.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a difference between a refrigerated one and one that's over the
Yes, in a sense. So there's something called, which I didn't dive deep into, I apologize. There are probiotics that are spore probiotics, S-P-O-R-E. Because probiotics are such an emerging health topic, and I think everyone's grabbing on at the opportunity because we consumers are finding like, wow, this is a miracle. Let's take a probiotic. I think more and more things are being put on our shelves that maybe aren't really effective. Spore probiotics, and what I was getting at is there's research to show that some of these probiotics aren't even reaching our large intestine for the absorption, right? So spore biotics have been researched to actually reach your colon. So that's something that you can consider. Whether or not refrigerated probiotics are more effective or less effective than the shelf stable, that's not necessarily true. I would just make sure that if you are buying refrigerated, to keep it refrigerated. If that is a spore probiotic, then by all means, that's an excellent choice. Trace Minerals is another one. I'm not from around here, but I do go to the Health Plus store sometimes, and they have some really good refrigerated probiotics. And one of them is in a blue container, and it's refrigerated, as I said, and it's Trace Minerals. That's a pretty good one. I think it's 30 million CFUs. Please go ahead. Did that answer your question, kind of? Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
There's use a probiotic that's called Dan Active. It's like supposed to be like it's a drink.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't know if it's refrigerated, didn't know if it was like, does it need to be more so something a little bit bigger, because it's not that, does that matter?
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, Dan Active, I think isn't that Dannon?
It's like a shot.
Yeah, isn't that Dannon? Yeah, so,
It has active
It's more or less like
ingredients.
Confer, that's similar to.
okay.
like-
Yeah, no, I don't think in terms of like consistency, if it makes it a good or a bad probiotic by any means, just make sure what's in it. Something else that I would consider too, supplements versus foods, especially kombucha and kefir, be mindful of how much added sugar is to it. That's one thing that I would say be mindful of. I do kombucha, I don't do it every day, and my favorite is called Health Aid. Pink Lady apple, it's phenomenal, but there is some sugar added to it. So in order for kombucha typically to be, to make kombucha, you add sugar to it, so that's something I would say. But no, just because it's less thick doesn't mean it's less effective.
You should be able to look to see how many CFUs or how much
Yep.
of the active culture is.
Not, I don't think down, regular yogurt well, so that was like the IT.
Yeah, version, but like yep, absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, I was grateful that she opened up the question about the children, because my daughter does have a lot of issues with her regularity. And so right now, I've been doing the gummies, and I didn't know, is it a waste of time? So she gets a
Probiotic
fiber
gummies?
She gets a probiotic gummy, and then she gets a probiotic fiber. I mean,
So-
she gets fiber gummies, and then she gets a probiotic as well, and
So
they're all
you're-
gummies.
So your gummy is probably either chicory root fiber, inulin, guar gum. Those are probably your top 3 ingredients that might be in there if I can guess off the top of my head. I don't want to say that that's bad, because sometimes kids just getting them to take something it can be a pull in
No,
itself.
I've had to go through, I cannot tell you how many
Yeah.
multivitamins,
Yeah,
how many
so-
this, how many that, so finally we settled on these, it's just like, all right, I like this.
Yeah, I think it's a give and take. Do I think it's like the most optimal? Maybe not, but is the most optimal gonna be something that she or he's gonna take? You know, I don't think that there's
Yeah, I
anything
don't
wrong
have to
with it.
fight her.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
She's
So I think it's,
self-directed, she goes, she takes them.
I also know too, to think about this in terms of children, I'll just speak because I don't wanna we're running out of time. With children, it's not necessarily a probiotic, that's what's gonna change it all, right? Remember, probiotics are one piece of the huge puzzle. So I would really look at, when it comes to children, yes, definitely maybe supplementing with probiotics, but how's their diet? Children are naturally picky eaters. You know what I mean? So that's something too, that is something that you have to work with. And I know I used to work in a feeding clinic at Cleveland Clinic. It's work. It's a lot of work to get children to eat those fruits and vegetables and to eat those really fiber-rich foods. So I would look at the health, or the diet, exercise. Now more and more our kids are exposed to screens. Sleep, you'd be surprised how that can change too throughout the years. And even, I know, you know, not giving personal testimony, but like stress and emotions, make sure that those are in check too. That's a big determinant too of bowel regularity too. It's oftentimes when kids are having irregular bowel movements, you can kind of associate what's going on up here too. That might be, you know,
Well, that
something.
was part of hers, yeah,
Yeah.
so we had to address that.
Exactly,
But-
exactly. Isn't it crazy how it's like
Yeah.
this spider web? It's not just one thing. It affects. It really is.
What do I do? She will only eat corn, but I don't give it to her, and very often I should say, and green beans on
Mhm.
occasion.
Mm-hmm.
We're done.
So when it comes to introducing foods to children, one, create a positive environment, because as stressful as it is when your child does not eat fruits and vegetables or does not
She'll
eat
try
what you made.
everything.
Okay, good.
She
because
tries everything because that's what we do.
Yeah.
We just have to try.
Yeah.
So she tries everything, and then there's nothing left. So I'm still struggling, like, even with the supplement or what do I need to do.
So-
She's never gonna grow, she's gonna stay this tall, right here.
What I would say-
She doesn't sleep,
few
she doesn't
things,
eat.
yeah. No.
She's never gonna grow.
A few things, truthfully though, to just make that very well known is that making sure that you create a positive environment around foods and around trying new foods, because they do listen and they do catch the vibe and what the tension is in that room. So sometimes it's a rebellious act to not eat things because they see that you're really stressed and mad and all that, and it's just a child being a child. When it comes to
There's
people
no
who
feeding
are,
plates in our house,
Yes.
none of that. It's,
So-
you have to understand when you're full.
yep, so when they're trying foods and they don't like it, that's okay. Let's always put, food, a well-balanced plate in front of, at the dinner table and let them pick and choose. But know that, it's important to maybe tell them, okay, sometimes it takes 10 times to try a food to actually know if you like it. So just because someone doesn't like peas as a child doesn't mean you won't like them as an adolescent. That's actually probably not true. You'll transition out of it because as your skin sheds, your taste buds change. Not always, but that's the case. Another thing too is how are you presenting it? So if someone doesn't like broccoli, like if your child or anyone doesn't like broccoli, okay, well, it might not be because you don't like the actual broccoli. It might be because of how it was prepared or presented. So sometimes putting them in stir fries and mixed dishes, they're more likely to eat it because it can sometimes mask it. If you steam or microwave your vegetables and they don't like it, okay, maybe next time we'll try it roasted. Maybe we will sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese on it or something along those lines.
Been
So,
there, done that.
okay,
So I reintroduce the same foods.
often.
Yes.
One thing too is one of my favorite tips is smoothies. It is remarkable. You can put, smoothies are so handy for picky people and just for anyone who struggles to get in their fruits and vegetables. I can make a smoothie and there will be 4 servings of fruits and vegetables in there. And it's not just fruit. I can put spinach, I can put avocado, I can put kale, I can put cauliflower in a smoothie. And you will never know it's in there. It's beautiful.
I tried that and I couldn't get out of the bathroom.
You can, so that might mean if you tried, are you talking about a smoothie with some
Yeah.
vegetables?
Vegetables and fruits and flaxseed and
Yeah,
chia,
so-
whatever.
So that might mean that your body's not used to all that fiber and your body's looking at it as a foreign substance. It also may mean that there might be something, that needs to be addressed too. But smoothies are a really good way to get in a lot of those nutrients. And it's a drinkable form. So children, even adults nowadays, most of us say we don't have time to sit for 20 minutes for breakfast or half hour. Great smoothie, grab and go. You have a well-balanced, basically, if you unliquefy that smoothie, it's a beautiful, well-balanced plate. But it tastes good. You don't even know that there's spinach in it or maybe cauliflower in it. It's a win-win for everyone.
Well, that was my next question. If I'm giving her a smoothie in the morning, am I being a good mom still?
Yeah, I drink smoothies all the time.
Is she getting it? Is she getting enough?
Yeah, I truthfully
And are there
recommend.
any other supplements that I should be concerned about?
No,
too
I
before
think
give
getting
her?
in smoothies is, I would recommend it for adults, for adolescents, for children. I think it's great. So yeah, by all means. Good. Any questions? I don't know if I put my contact information on there, but I do have it on that old handout. But